You're listening to the My Simplified Life podcast, and this is episode number 285. Welcome to the My Simplified Life podcast, a place where you will learn that your past and even your present don't define your future. Regardless of what stage of life you're in, I want you to feel inspired and encouraged to pursue your dreams, simplify your life, and start taking action. I'm your host, Michelle Gluggeback, author of How to Get On Podcasts, the podcast matchmaker, and CEO and founder of the MLG Collective. I'm excited to share the stories and life lessons of changemakers and authors with you while taking you on my own journey. This is My Simplified Life. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Michelle Gluggeback, and today's is a special one. It was a live stream recording of the Books That Build book club that I launched and started. Our first book was Democracy in Retrograde, and the co-author Sami Sage joined me for a conversation about not only the book, but about what we can all do to build community, to find self-care, and to really keep going during these times. We wrapped it up with a fun little question and answer part and synopsis of what's going on in White Lotus, because that's what building community is about. It's about finding things that you have in common with others and keeping the conversation going. So I hope you enjoy it. Make sure you pick up a copy of Democracy in Retrograde. Hi, Sami.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. I am ridiculously stoked to be talking to you. And I told you I'm going to fangirl, so I have to fangirl because you are doing such important work and you are keeping so many of us like, I don't know, breathing.
Well, that really means a lot, and I'm glad to be able to, bring it even closer to you,
Yes.
honestly, and talk about the book and, give people another sort of dose of feeling better or more empowered, and more hopeful.
Can we, before we dive in, for anyone who doesn't know who you are and what you do, can you do a quick introduction, please?
Yes. So I'm Sami Sage. I'm one of the founders of Betches Media. I founded it alongside two of my childhood friends in 2011. And, obviously we've been around for 14 years as a huge digital media company, mostly for millennial and Gen Z women. But in 2016, I started the company's news and politics vertical, Betches News, formerly known as Betches Sup, although the email is still called that. And really, it was founded on this idea that news consumption should be accessible. And the goal of it was to put news and politics in the terms that people who were maybe not like super political or super up to date could really understand and appreciate it. And that was also inspired by sort of this at the time merging between politics and culture in a way where it kind of, I think politics and Donald Trump made what was going on in the news sort of prolific and everywhere and just impossible to separate from any part of public life. And we had founded it on the idea that politics, the Senate is really not much different than the Real Housewives sometimes. And
So
we
true.
wanted to be able to put it in those terms for people. I've always really leaned into this idea that politics and culture cannot be separated. But I think people kind of look at it a little differently. So that is the mission of Betches News. I host two podcasts. One is American Fever Dream with my co-host Under the Desk News, who has built her own huge, empire on TikTok and YouTube and Substack. So I also host the Morning Announcements podcast, which is 5 minutes breaking down the news every day, trying to stay true to that, making the news acceptable mission. So that, is basically just a breakdown of the headlines every day for 5 minutes. And most recently, the co-author of Democracy in Retrograde, How to Make Changes Big and Small in Our Country and Our Lives, alongside Emily Amick, aka Emily in Your Phone, if you follow her on every platform. And what we'd really our goal with this book was to answer questions that we had frequently been asked in our experience, as people who were running news-based accounts on social media. Sorry, my dog is trying to get comfortable around me.
Welcome.
Yeah, he'll figure it out. Um, good boy. Yeah. So, um, people had always asked us, like, what should I do? How should I get involved, as they watch sort of, these hopeless stories unfold every day. And we wanted to write a book that could actually answer that question, not just for 2024, but in kind of a way that would remain timeless and apply to any era that you're trying to uphold your democracy.
I remember exactly when I read it. It was actually before Biden dropped out. And I was on a plane. We were going to St. Louis, and I scribbled all over it. And I was like, yes, this is it. And oh, this is going to be so great. And then he dropped out. And then it was the same week that he endorsed Kamala. And I was like, okay, well, now we have the guide at least. Like, we're going to get through this. And I think that since then, the book is needed even more so. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
I mean, it's intentionally it's a nonpartisan book. It's really not focused on the details of any particular issue. It's supposed to be and it's not even really totally political, to be honest with you. It's not really all about politics and the system. There is a quick explainer on how government works, at least at the time we wrote it. And a lot of it is really, we talk about how it's really a self-help book, and that community care and civic engagement are forms of self-care. And the way that manifests is through connections with other people. And the reason that ties into democracy is because a strong democracy is one in which there's strong social capital between people. There's connections within the community. Part of the polarization and isolation that people are experiencing are a result of a more broken social fabric. And when you have that, Hannah Arendt said in I don't know why the name of her book is escaping me at the moment, but she wrote that like an autocratic society is basically a series of atomized individuals. And the reason that an autocrat or any sort of totalitarian governing non-democratic entity needs that is because they need the relationship that you have to only be with the state, so they can fill you with their version of what the truth is. And that ultimately is what leads to a successful fascist regime. But if you have people in community with each other speaking together and actually compromising on how we want to run our society, and that people are actually engaged in, because I think part of the issue is people who are not so polarized or not so 100% bought in, they're kind of silenced and marginalized in the conversation. And when that happens, you cede the public square to the most extreme views who will not compromise. And that's ultimately kind of where we're at right now, where you have these very calcified poles, and there's not much daylight. There's so much daylight between them.
I think what I find that many are wondering, myself included, is like, what do we do now? Like, so we've created the book club, and I, the book club's big thing, and Emily talks about this too, of just create a book club and start this engagement and these conversations. And yet I think that we feel like, that, at least for myself too, is like we have to do something bigger. And what can we do that's bigger than coming together and saying, yeah, we all need to do something, but what is it that we do? And outside of calling our congressmen, our senators, because in a blue state, I can call Alex Padilla and Adam Schiff all day long, and they're like, yep, we're with you. Because every communication I get is, we voted that way. What do we do?
Well, not everyone lives in a blue state or has
Right.
my representative. Well, actually, they redistricted me, so my representative now is. But it doesn't matter. That's not the point. Um, I agree with you. People feel like, well, what do I do? It's like, I have good news for you. Everyone you're doing it right now. This is part of it. And I think this idea of nothing feels big enough comes from our earlier perceptions of what resistance looks like. And we think about, the Civil Rights March and the Montgomery bus boycott. And you think about, even the Women's March and all these, all the resistance in the first administration. And taking the first, let's take the first administration out of it. The Montgomery bus boycott was a significantly organized effort that had a plan and a leader, and it had a long, it didn't just happen overnight. It was a response to something that was pre-existing for a long time. So I think when we look, we can look to past examples for inspiration, but the truth is we've never been here before.
Right.
And with these particular circumstances where Democrats don't have any branches of government, where the court is what it is, where the leadership in the Democratic Party is functioning as though it's 1992, I swear to God. And it basically, you're looking for something big to do. And what I've actually been telling people is think small. And I don't mean small as in like small actions. I mean, as in maybe no one ever finds out what you did. Like maybe it's a type of resistance that resistance or just action, it doesn't even, that exists in defiance of what they would want. And thinking about what can you do on, the obvious thing when I say small is like the local level. So I think a lot is going to be more effective at the local level. And I've actually read, and there's an article by Stephen Levitsky and one other scholar about kind of their assessment of what American fascism could look like. And they basically said that other examples of autocratic slides aren't quite the same as the United States because of federalism and because the states will have responses to things. So getting involved at the state and local, county, whatever, town level, school level, I think that will have so much more impact on people's like daily lives than they realize. So local. Then in terms of like, I think everyone kind of has to look to, we can talk about the book and the personalities, but like, I'm going to get more practical. Everyone has to look to their moments in their life, their decision points. Do I say this? Do I not say this? Do I, contribute to this? Do I talk about this? If you work somewhere, the person who was working at the housing and urban development who decided to put up that AI image of Donald Trump like literally kissing Elon Musk's foot, like that's someone who had to create, no one puts that in the organizing manual. They had an idea and they did it. They were in the position to do it. If I had thought of that idea, I couldn't have done it. So I think it's really about everyone looking at their unique position and thinking outside the box. I mean, I really encourage people to think outside the box. No matter what level you're at, I think that's really what this age calls for, because what we've seen is that the old system is being rejected. The old ways of doing things, the old ways of communicating and speaking are being rejected, both by MAGA Republicans who are following something very new, and also by, I see why my light is messed up. Okay, whatever. It was running out of battery. Sorry. The old ways of doing things are also being rejected on the Democratic side because they're not working. And, I think that everyone says Democrats lost the message war. There are a few reasons why that is the case. It's not just because they have a bad actual message. It's that they don't know how to, the medium is the message, and they don't know how to adapt what they're doing for now, essentially. Yeah. So
I think that we're seeing some of them try to adapt, and I keep sharing with everyone, like, we need to applaud them when they do something different and they're trying, something new where they're showing up every day. And I know that both of my senators are. Schiff posted last night. He's actually answering questions on his Instagram,
Wow. Oh
and
my
I'm like,
God.
that's incredible.
Do they realize that like all of us do that every day and they're
Right.
supposed to be representative of the people? That's the thing is like, I'm so sick of, and this is just, and I think we all are so sick of this idea that these people are supposed to represent us and yet they are just not in touch at all. And that's
Mhm.
reflected by how they communicate. And there's just really, you see the difference in both parties for a lot of the with a lot of the representatives.
Which is why we need younger people, more women to run.
But
And
question,
yeah,
Bernie Sanders is
I love
is
Bernie.
okay, but the thing is the man is 80 something years old and he's going on a national tour. It's not just about someone's age. And like, trust me, I don't think he should be running. Like, I think him running again is like, oh, it's wild to me that he's doing that. But because I think someone does not need to be in elected office in order to be effective and important and to move the needle and to have influence and power. So that's one thing. But I think that like the fact that he actually has like the oomph to go do that and is just like, fuck it, I'm gonna go talk to the people wherever. I'm just gonna get on the road and this is what I'm doing. Like, that's how they need to be thinking. And
Mhm.
yes, younger people are more apt to think like that, but not necessarily,
True.
it's not magical.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I appreciate the way he comes out. He says what he says, the way he wants to say it. I appreciate AOC, Jasmine Crockett. Oh, the video that she
Yeah.
just fuck off, Elon. Yes, we're all going to say it. We are cussing on this episode as much as possible.
Yeah.
Because we need to say it. And I love that this is coming out because I think that it kind of gives permission to the rest of us who aren't saying, if we're feeling it, but we're not coming right out and saying it. And I think that this election has had a lot of people say, okay, I'm going to come out and say this is what I stand for, which there was a part of me that I kind of laughed when people said, "Oh, I lost a bunch of followers because I said that I'm for, gay rights." I'm like, "Well, maybe if you would have said it to begin with, nobody would have left you." Uh,
Right. 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 That's a great point. That is a great point. It's like, how did they not know?
yeah, you aren't speaking up for what you stand for, and I think that that's been a huge divide. It's funny because it's something my husband says. He's like, "At least I can appreciate when someone is MAGA and they wear the red hat because we know exactly where they stand on everything, and it's
Mhm.
those who are silent that we have to be afraid of because we never quite know."
Right, I get it. I mean, there's people do. I have heard people say something to that effect, like a lot. But then I'm like, okay, or they're a proud of these views. Like,
Right.
it's. I get it. I get that some people would prefer, someone who's like straight up about it. At least there's no surprises. But it's, everyone kind of comes from a different place. I think that the red hat is ultimately a cultural symbol and has more to do with like where you come from, whether people will wear it. I think has more to do with where they come from than and what the people around them do than like and their own perhaps taste than like whether they do or don't want people to know.
hmm And speaking of them, so one of the questions somebody had was like, how do we have conversations with people who are MAGA or Trump supporters, which I mean, it's one and the same, right? But I feel like some people think, well, I'm not MAGA. I just voted Republican. And
Mhm.
I get it. You voted with who your party is, but it is the MAGA party. How do we have these conversations? Do we even approach these conversations? Because there's also a lot of talk of how do we welcome in those who now regret it? Do we even have to? Do we owe them that to welcome them in or and befriend them and say, oh, okay, even though we showed you what was going to happen, you still voted that way and now you regret it. So now we'll show you the welcome mat.
I have to say, I think this is kind of a circumstantial answer. Now, as a quite a privileged person and someone who does talk about these things online and I'm knowledgeable about them. I think that it's kind of incumbent on me to put myself in uncomfortable conversations when appropriate about, that would try to convey a certain point to someone, and to, kind of subject myself to those conversations. Now, some people, those conversations can be really traumatic. If like your family member doesn't respect you because of your, you're trans or gay or whatever it is, like that kind of thing is a different answer than what I just said,
Mm-hmm.
where that conversation can really impact your mental health or your safety or something, there's something bigger at stake than just how this conversation goes and does it put you in a bad mood or not. So I think my advice for, those people would be you do what I would say safety and your mental health are the first priority, because you're probably not going to change someone's mind, definitely not in one conversation. Um, and by the way, we do have like actual tips for this in the book, but I'm kind of giving you you know,
For
we have
anyone in book
tactical,
club who
technical tips.
didn't read the book.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We have technical, tactical tips in there, but this is more like bigger picture. So, but if you're someone like me, I am not someone who believes in like writing off the other side, both as a practical matter and as a just it's not my taste. I think that reactionary like rhetoric and thinking is really damaging and non-constructive and basically like prevents compromise in a lot of ways, and often under the guise of like, well, I'm just being balanced or centrist or whatever. um and sometimes it's really, I mean, all the time, it's really in the way you talk about something to someone, knowing that like getting in an argument with someone is probably not going to be effective. And well, that will probably be the least effective thing you could do. And I think like asking a lot of questions and trying to hear someone out so that you like kind of soften you sort of like till the soil of the way they think about things. And, the idea is not to like they're not going to have there's not like a moment where like you're just going to deliver this perfect argument like in the West Wing and then the person be like, oh, you're right, I'm going to switch my party registration now. Like none of that is going to happen. The way people think about things is something as significant as this. If you're trying to change their mind or maybe make them aware of something that they're not aware of, or
Mhm.
ignorant to, is a not as nice way, more judgmental way to say it. But I think that kind of thinking, like, also is unconstructive. Like, it's not really constructive for me to call them ignorant. Like, who wants to learn something from someone who calls them ignorant?
Mhm.
So, I, especially because so much is like you want to, we all want to think like people can just, they can just go educate themselves. Like, actually, that's much more complicated of an endeavor than you think, when they are being constantly fed things via algorithm, and also people have busy lives. So and they, and the trust has been so broken down in media outlets and journalists, like that is not some easy feat anymore. So being like condescending about that, like, is not going to be as helpful as actually just kind of talking through your own perspective and the way you feel about something, um and laying down facts where it makes sense. um and I think that like expect things to take more than one conversation, or one like day. And if these are really big topics, so like if you're talking to your friend about like abortion, like I don't think you're going to solve the question of, does life begin at conception? No, if that's something they believe, but there's there are more angles from which you can approach that conversation and talk about why this is meaningful to you, and give your what you think, thinking about what that person would care about,
Mhm.
and maybe trying to enlighten them from that perspective. But I think about this as like, everyone wants to know, what do I do? What do I do? Like that, I picture that just like a car wheel in mud. Like, that's what everyone's sounds like, not in an offensive way, but that is the vibe when it's going to take time and a cultural shift that is going to only going to happen by like relationships and trusted bridging across the aisle and to people who do not vote, because more people don't vote, I believe, than voted for either candidate, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe I fact check that. Maybe it's
But
his lie.
regardless, it's
Okay.
okay. Well, I'll fact
Regardless,
check it
there's a
for the
quite
episode.
a
Yeah.
large proportion of people who do not vote at all, who are eligible voters. And I think that is a bigger, people just sort of forget about this. And then there's all the people who do vote, but they are Googling, is Joe Biden the candidate? So, we have bigger issues than just, changing the mind of MAGA people.
Yeah. I want to talk I want to talk more about the book too. Let's talk about, you mentioned self-care in there, and that this is all a form of self-care. And I really like having this conversation, to me, is a form of self-care. And I think that having all of the conversations with like other moms at school, sporting events, that when we're conversing about it and you're going, oh, I'm not alone, that's a form of self-care in and
Exactly.
of itself.
Exactly. And that is what you're talking about is actually like the heart of the book, the heart of life. Like those connections with people are what makes our lives, and caring about someone who you encounter just because they're they're a person and they're in your space. And I think this sort of straying from that, the importance of that, realizing it, is what has led to so much dehumanization.
Mm-hmm.
And so many like antisocial values and the way people present themselves in the world. And I think what exactly what you're saying is what I mean when I say pulling together like the social fabric and strengthening the social fabric. The being in concert with in community with other people is self-care. And what we recommend in the book is to try to, and we provide tools for this and exercises and a personality quiz. It's really to guide you in a way that you're going to be figuring out what you can do on a more regular basis with the time, skills, resources, and interests you have, and how you can enact those things in accordance with your values. And so identifying those values is really important. And when you live in accordance with your values and you're regularly doing things that reflect them and that that enhance them, and you connect with people who share them, you are going to have a much richer life. And that is both substance to us and to the greater system.
I think one concern that comes up for me as a mom is that, I always preach that racism is a learned behavior, that all of these things are learned behaviors. And we're actually seeing on the playground, quite literally as of yesterday, that these kids are repeating what the parents are saying. And so how do we almost combat that? I mean, I know what I'm teaching my kids, and the conversation, I'll give you the example of this morning on the way to school was, the two little girls on the playground asked a fifth grader about their birth certificate, and then they wanted to know what gender was on the birth certificate. And I go, they're 8. Well, mommy, what exactly is a birth certificate? And I explained what a birth certificate is. And obviously we talk politics in this house. They know what's going on, but not to the extent that they know about birthright citizenship. They don't know about ICE deportations. They don't know about gender markers and, all of this stuff. And I was totally blown away that
They're
8-year-olds
talking
are
about
discussing about this. Yes. So how do you have any suggestions on something like that? Because I went, oh shit.
Well, I'll be honest, I'm not a parent and I don't know nothing about like developmental psychology or what is appropriate for different ages. And, I don't know. I don't want to prescribe what I don't know what parents want their kids to know or what they should know or what they want to convey to them. But we do have something in the book that is basically tips for raising civically engaged kids. And we felt that we were qualified to write that because we were kids who were we were people who were raised to be civically engaged as kids. And I think it comes down to, again, like values at the age, for an age appropriate level. And, I don't know what an 8-year-old understands versus a 10-year-old or anything like that. But I think kind of maybe just, kids are smart. So I think even just like explaining it for real, what it is at the level that they can understand, and kind of putting it in a perspective that you think, and you don't have to insult anyone else's point of view, because I think probably that's like, I think the concern is that you don't then want like your kid to respond something potentially like bad to other people
Yeah.
in next time they hear that. But you want them to know that what that person said is not something you believe or you agree with, and why. I think like asking questions like, do you think that people should get kicked out of the country? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
My advice to my kids was, I said, you shut it down, because it's really none of their business what the gender is on someone's birth certificate. I said,
yeah,
that's
you could,
that's what you do.
right,
You shut down the conversation and say it's none of your business.
right.
Um, because they know what a transgender person is. We have friends, all of that. I think I'm just so curious as to what, and these are value. Again, it goes back to the values of, these are what we believe, but how do we help the next generation not continue down this path? It's
Well,
just a
I think
lot.
like, I mean, honestly, like I think it's too soon. Like there are things that are gonna happen. Everyone talks about millennials, Gen Z, blah blah blah. Who when I was in college, I'm like the core millennial, like I am the middle of the millennials. And when we were in college, everyone was like, we hate millennials, they're so entitled, they blah blah blah. And it's like, we didn't even get a chance to like grow up before this narrative emerged about this whole generation. And I think like no one knew what was going to happen to the millennials. Like no one knew that when they were uh in middle school, that like 9/11 would happen, and that when millennials were entering the workforce, that they'd have a recession, and then the pandemic would be when so many of them were having kids. Like it and the way that those events shape millennials is going to change them. So I see the same thing that will happen with Gen Z. Everyone used to say, "Oh, Gen Z is the future. They're so savvy. They're so into mental health." Then they got TikTok and the pandemic, and half of Gen Z, no offense, is like really brain rotted and can't read a book. No, it was a book club, so I assume we're amongst
Yeah.
safe people
Yeah.
who want to read a book. And that is something that they could proudly get their opinions from the comments on TikTok. That is something that couldn't have been predicted. So, who knows what will happen to like that whole generation, A. And people can grow into something that they were not raised into, frankly. And like, not everyone, I think, is a hopeless cause because they were raised into something else. And I think the best that people can do is really worry about like their kids and the ones that, I'm sure there's all, again, this is for me to speak to parenting, and the dynamics of that is difficult because I don't know like the subtleties, but I imagine there's a sense of like parents who you are on board with their sort of values, and they're, you can kind of talk about that with those parents and, speak to them, ask them, how are they handling these things? I think with like the birth certificate example, I think there's something to like privacy that kids kind of understand. Like, it's like there's something to that where it's like if kids are asking, oh, do your parents have like a gun? Like, I don't know what people I mean, I imagine there's so many things that could come up. And there's kind of just, I think, maybe like something that you can keep within the family that's like certain like safe topics up to maybe a certain age, where it's like these are certain topics that uh, you know we think this like I think this way about.
Mhm.
And I think maybe even by asking them questions, you can get them to arrive at that for their own opinion. And then you say, well, this is, that's personal, or it's not anyone's business, or, a birth certificate is just a thing that you get at the hospital that says that you were born. And, it's just, it shouldn't be a political thing to have a birth
Right.
certificate. And I think that you saying, like, you talking about it as just is what it is creates the impression. And you can say some people think, I don't want to, I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, but okay.
Yeah.
You get what
I
I'm
get
saying.
it. No, I
Like,
get it.
about
Yeah.
the appropriateness and sort of like working with every kid to like come to understand their own values through asking questions.
Yeah. I want to know about, so you writing with Emily, the book, what was that like for the two of you to write the book together? Like, did you hole up together for a bit, or were
Oh, no.
you, or I'm going to do this, you do this, we'll send it to each other. How does that work? Because I love to collaborate, but I don't know about writing a book.
It's not. I mean, I've written books with my business partners before. That was, it was different than that. I think Emily and I have very complementary parts of our resumes and expertise. And I'm really like trying to put it in like colloquial words and make it like super digestible. And Emily brings like the knowledge of having worked in these systems. And, it was honestly a crazy process. As you know, Emily's been very sick.
Yeah.
And it was due it was due the end of summer 2023, and my dad was sick and passed away that summer. So honestly, it was a very, very tough time to be writing the book. And it was just kind of like what's it called?
A process, obviously.
A process.
Yeah.
And it was a labor.
Yeah.
But we honestly, our editor was incredibly impactful, and we, she really helped us think about it and think about ways to put the personalities into categories and how to, actually come up with good action items that could make sense for each one. And yeah, I mean, it was a really big process, but we really are very proud of what came out of it.
You should be. I love it. I've bought many copies. As you've
Thank you.
seen, I've posted and tagged you. I'm like, look, I bought more. Friends are
you.
getting it. I'm like the Oprah of Democracy in Retrograde.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
You get a book, you get a book. Yes. I love it. And I'm like, nobody can borrow my book. So, and it's all written
you
in.
write in it. It's
Yes.
like, yeah.
It's like the Bible, but I don't write in the Bible, but it is like the Bible that we need to refer to and keep going. And yeah, I appreciate you so much and what you're doing. And just thank you for coming on. And I know that everyone is grateful because you've been the chatter at school pickup.
Oh my gosh. Well, I wouldn't know what to tell your kids about birth certificates. So
that is okay. I don't either. And
I will tell you, I have a lot of nieces and nephews. And anytime I get a question, I'm just like, ask your parents.
Yeah,
like, I don't know. I don't want to be responsible for saying something that, you weren't supposed to hear.
And I talk too much. My husband says so. Ever since they were little, he's like, you tell them too much. I'm like, well, that's how they learn,
I'll be honest. I think I grew up, I mean, I guess it kind of depends what you would say, what was told versus what was figured out. But I grew up in a house where I knew a lot. And I actually think that on balance, it's better to know more.
I agree. I think so too.
I think the worst case, you're just kind of exposed to something too early that you were going to probably get exposed to anyway eventually.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to keep talking.
To a certain extent.
Yeah. You are amazing. Can you share where everyone can find you in case they don't already know?
Yes, you can listen to the morning announcements every day. It is 5 minutes and you will have a working knowledge of what is going on, and you don't have to worry about it for the rest of the day. American Fever Dream weekly, Tuesdays, occasionally Thursdays. We have guests with Under the Desk News. And you can find me on Instagram at Sami, on Threads at Sami, and I'm everywhere else, Substack, Blue Sky, and TikTok, Sami Sage Says. So
And you
those
know
are
what we
my
missed talking about too was White Lotus.
Oh, I'm happy to chat about that, if the listeners wanna know.
Even if the listeners don't want to know, I'm like, I truly, as I sat down Sunday night watching this week's episode, I'm going, oh, what's Sammy going to think? These people are
Oh,
twisted.
yeah, but that's why I
This-
like it.
and yet my husband's like, they're kind of boring me.
Oh,
He
they're
goes, I
not.
hope that it picks up. And I go, but it it's
Every f
twisted.
Not a
And
frame is wasted. What are you talking about?
I,
I think I get what people mean when they say that, but I think that maybe they're not trying to watch it like it's a book,
yeah, yeah. The
like some
three
of us.
friends, it's just
The best.
yeah, they're a mess. And they're just mean. And it feels very Real Housewivesy. Like
It
we're friends, we're on a trip, and yet we're all going to talk shit about each other behind each other's back.
it's really just astounding how Mike White knew how to write 3 women like that. And yeah, I mean, it's okay. It's the kind of thing where like if you're with someone for like so long and you're sick of them, like you kind of can see that all happening, like just in the course of like a long, you know, close-knit friendship. But because they never see each other, and it's like, what is actually holding you together that you'd be
Yeah.
on this trip in the first place if you don't actually really like each other enough to like go one night
Mm-hmm.
without just descending into it?
Yeah. And the one, I forget the character's name, but it's the one the Austin one, who's
Kate.
like, she's just not happy with anyone. Like, she's the little shit stirrer.
I think it's going to be revealed that she's actually the least happy one
Oh,
because
yeah.
she has the least like going on in her life. And I think look, these aren't like crazy revelations in the shit talking.
Yeah.
It's not even like that bad. It's kind of just, you know,
The one that kills me though is she looks great, really. But did you see her face? Like,
yeah.
but
She
she
used
looks
to have the
great.
face that everyone wants it.
Yeah.
Now it's all like waxy.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
I also think her face is, I don't see it. I see it's great.
Yeah.
Looks great to me.
Yeah. I was like, I would take her face. I'd be fine with that.
Yeah, I'll have her face.
Schwarzenegger, I'm not a fan of. I'm like, you're a little creepy.
He's supposed to be.
But I
Very.
mean, he looks creepy anyway.
Oh, he does. He does look, he does a great job at that role, being the creep he's supposed to seem like. Truly.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's quite amazing.
Yeah.
But I love the show and I'm so excited to see what else unfolds.
Same. We redid our bathroom downstairs years ago based on the wallpaper from White Lotus.
I love that.
I'm
I
obsessed.
love
Yeah.
that. I want to see a picture actually.
I will send you a picture after this.
Please. Oh my
Yes.
gosh, please do.
Yeah, we ordered it from like Turkey.
I love that. I really want to see it. Please.
I will send it to you. Yes.
Yeah.
I won't keep you any longer. You are amazing. I'm so grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you. This was great. I really appreciate you having me on, and I'm happy to talk to you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
I am so grateful for Sami, for Emily, her co-author, but also for everybody who is using their platform to speak out, who is helping all of us who want to speak out more and to give us tips and guides and to write books like Democracy in Retrograde. I'm so grateful because these are talents that we need and they're talents that are helping us find our talents. And during this time, we need to come together. We have to have conversations. It's important because we're not alone and this can feel very lonely. Trust me, I know. I'm speaking from experience. So have chats with friends, with the moms at pickup, with the people at sporting events. Say hi. That's how you start it. And then see where the conversation goes. We're not going to change people's minds overnight, but we can gather together in community. We can find those commonalities and we can together make a difference. You are not alone. Go follow Sami. Let her know that you heard her here, that you appreciate the work she's done, and be sure to grab a copy of Democracy in Retrograde.